Hello everyone, and welcome to this month's Support Coordinator webinar, proudly brought to you by Endeavour Foundation. I'm Vicky Gray, your host for today's session. Today we'll dive into billable hours, what's within and out of scope for the Support Coordinator role, with our guest presenter, Mary Ingerton from Support Coordination Academy. As we gather online with attendees joining us from across Australia, I'd like to acknowledge the significance of the lands we all call home. If you'd like to honour the traditional custodians of the lands you're logging in from, please feel free to share the name in the chat. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Gubbi Gubbi people, traditional custodians of the land on which I'm hosting from today. In the spirit of reconciliation, Endeavour Foundation acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. Now, a quick note on housekeeping. Your microphones and cameras will stay off, but we'd love for you to join the discussion in the chat. If you have any questions for our presenters, please pop them in the Q&A section and we'll answer them after the presentation. You'll also find a link to our privacy policy in the chat, so feel free to reach out if you have any questions about that. As mentioned earlier, during this webinar, we'll delve into billable hours, what's within and out of scope for the Support Coordinator role. Our presenter today is Mary Ingerton from Support Coordination Academy. But before handing you over to Mary, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Shania Brennan. Shania is Endeavour Foundation's Business Improvement Specialist, leading a team of social workers and disability specialists who advocate for our clients. With qualifications in psychology, HR management and social work, plus 8 years in the community sector, she's passionate about empowering vulnerable people with choice and control. Over to you, Shania.
Hello, everyone. Alrighty, thank you, Vicky. And hello, everyone. As always, it is wonderful to be here with you all today. So as Vicky mentioned, my name is Shania, and as you know, today we are talking all things billable hours and what's within scope and out of scope for support coordinators. So the way that I kind of wanted to address or talk to you all today is a little bit about how Endeavour Foundation approaches and supports support coordinators in having the information you need when you need it to be able to do what you need for the clients that we collectively support within the hours that you do have. So I guess we start by saying we absolutely understand how limited support coordinator hours are, and that more times than not, you don't have the sufficient hours to do the work that needs to be done to support your clients. So how do we try and help? I guess there's a twofold response here. One of those is kind of the way that we communicate with you as a support coordinator. So really making sure we've got an open line of communication, we're being transparent, we're ensuring that you have the information you need when you need it, and we're being really mindful about what we are contacting you for and making sure that it's purposeful and in the best interests of the participant. One of the other ways that we also try to support you guys is in the way that we structure our enabling functions, our service delivery function, to ensure that the people that we support and our participants are at the forefront of everything that we do. So we've got a number of different functions that also jump into support where needed for all different sorts of things that is all centered around the client or the participant. So we've got our service delivery function. They're our frontline teams. They're doing the daily support for all of our people, doing a wonderful job of that. We've got our client safeguarding and complex teams who are here to help when things are getting a little bit more complex. We need a little bit more support. There might be something that's going on for the participant that just requires a little bit of extra help at the moment so we can get the right structures in place and make sure that we're meeting their needs in the best way we can. We also have our client services team who support with all things around funding, and then our client intake and our client support teams. Our intake team's function is very much about welcoming new people into the Endeavour team, and you know that we are bringing we always look forward to supporting all new participants that are interested in Endeavour services. And the other team is our client support team, and they are our funding team. And I'm sure any of you that have been here a few times hearing me talk have heard me talk about what this team do. The COS team, our change of situation team, they're here to help when a participant's funding may not be meeting their needs. They're a team of social workers jumping into provide supports around drafting change of situation applications and building that out, because again, we know how many hours it takes to put together a really quality change of situation or review of reviewable decision or plan review, whatever is needed for the participant. And so that team are there to provide some support to you guys. I thought I would wrap up by also just briefly talking about an example, a story, a client-led story that we have recently had from a gentleman in the Toowoomba region. He has been a supported employee with Endeavour Foundation for many, many years and was living in a SIL home with another organisation who unfortunately had to close their doors and were not able to support him any longer. So what we were able to do was jump in. We had quite a large response from all of our teams to wrap around him and make sure that he was able to continue receiving the supports that he needs. And we were able to work with the support coordination team as well to welcome him into his new SIL home out in the Toowoomba region. And in doing that, we were also able to support with a change of situation because his funding wasn't actually meeting his support needs. And so we had a twofold response, welcoming him into the home and also being able to provide some support around the change of situation because his support coordinators didn't have the sufficient hours that they needed. And even though we know everyone jumps in to help, I guess the point of today is to really talk about some of the things that Endeavour do to jump in and help try and relieve some of that pressure. So that is a little bit about how we support. And what I'm going to do now is hand over to Mary, who's going to take us through the rest of today's discussion. So thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Shania. That was awesome. And then I know, having to working with very high caseloads sometimes, that any additional support that we can get around gathering evidence, making assessments, identifying complexity and increasing complexity and support needs is always very, very helpful. Okay, so today, again, we're going to be talking about billable hours. And also just remember that if you have any questions, put them in the Q&A. You can put them in the chat. They'll be transferred over to the Q&A. And at the end of the session, we'll make some time to actually go through the questions and answers. So make sure you put those in and we'll make a start. Okay, so what are we going to cover today? So we're going to have a look at understanding what you can and can't bill for under the NDIS as a support coordinator. So exploring best practice and recording and communicating billable time, but also building confidence and explaining your role boundaries to participants, stakeholders, service providers, or whoever that might be. Okay, let's go. So I'm just going to move this along. Okay, so let's set the context first. So obviously the NDIS pricing arrangements and price limits, which we often refer to as the price guide, sets the rules for billing. So what service providers, so providers who utilise NDIS funding to provide services to participants of the NDIS. So it sets the rules around what they can and can't charge for. So it outlines when providers can claim, how much they can charge, and what the NDIA considers billable activities, which are high-level activities, things like face-to-face, non-face-to-face, travel, cancellations. Doesn't provide a lot of detail about what that actually means, especially for a support coordinator role. So for support coordinators, it is essential to know exactly which tasks fall within these categories. So understanding the difference between billable and non-billable time is critical, both for compliance and for setting really clear professional boundaries. Okay, so it's equally important as our responsibility to educate participants and their support network around the boundaries of the support coordinator role. So what's within scope and what's out of scope of your role. I suppose the reality for support coordination is that we get told how many hours are available on the plan, and then we need to work out what the funding is, how many hours that is available. But also the reality of our role is that we spend at least, I would say, 75% of our time completing activities on a participant's behalf, but it's around completing those non-face-to-face activities. So it's really behind the scenes. It's not always, a participant doesn't always see or understand what it is that we do. Okay, this is why understanding billable versus non-billable activities is not just a technical requirement, it's also fundamental to our ethical and transparent practice as support coordinators. Okay, let's get into it. So billable activities, what's within scope? So billable activities are those activities completed by a support coordinator on behalf of a participant. So it's where a participant has agreed for you to complete activities on their behalf. So it directly supports the implementation, monitoring and review of a participant's NDIS plan, which includes activities that reinforce that capacity building focus of the role. Yeah, linking into other supports within their community, mainstream supports, building that resilient network of supports around a person. So the NDIS talk about a range of billable activities. So face-to-face or sometimes it's virtual support. So this includes preparation for meetings and facilitating meetings themselves, it's generally with a participant. So whether it's in their home, could be in a local cafe, could be online. These includes meeting with a participant directly, or you could be supporting a participant in an NDIS review meeting to help guide them through that NDIS process. So provided travel, labour costs. So these are very clearly, well, hopefully clearly, spelled out within the NDIS price guide. So there are rules around claiming provided travel and related costs, and it includes the amount you can claim, when you can claim, and which expenses are claimable. And these tend to change every time we get a pricing arrangements and price limit update, especially once a year. So keeping on top of those and understanding that is really, really important. The other thing is around provided travel is some support coordinators actually, or some organisations, claim for travel. Other organisations don't, because support coordinators often work virtually and use their own cars, and therefore they claim that against their tax. So there's different ways in using that. Non-face-to-face support is probably the most time that we use our billable activities. And it spans right across the support coordinator's workload. So here are some examples. Research into providers and supports requested by the participants, so including things like when you're making phone calls, you're sending emails, researching on the internet, linking in with providers, preparing for and facilitating and following up in stakeholder meetings. So writing your case notes, your action plans, your risk assessments. These are all billable time because they're around your professional responsibility to evidence how you have supported a participant. That's the documentation and the evidence that you use to provide information to the NDIS around the level of complexity that you're working with, evidence around why you need additional support coordinator hours, how a participant's situation has changed. So safeguarding activities, things like recording when an incident has happening, capturing, getting copies of incident reports from stakeholders, submitting a change of situation, so gathering evidence, writing change of situation, writing a support coordinator's report that actually accompanies that change of situation, that summarises and clearly details the urgency in response that's required and summarises and highlights the points within the reports to actually say these are the things you need to take note of. But it's about collating and bringing all of that information that you've provided in a change of situation so that the reader has very clear clarity around what they should be taking notice of. Also things like reviewing service agreements on behalf of participants, so making sure that a participant's rights have been taken into consideration, that a participant understands their service agreements, and also linking in a participant with formal advocates if required. Support other non-face-to-face are like forecasting and monitoring budget expenditure and statements, and also planning. We do a lot of planning, continuous planning within our support coordinator role. So planning around current needs and future needs. So non-face-to-face, the main part of our support coordinator role. NDIS requested reports. So these are things like the reports that are specifically requested by the NDIA. So they include the 8-week implementation report and end of plan review reports or progress updates. So it's about the preparation, the evidence gathering, the writing and submitting of reports are all billable activities. Okay, short notice cancellations. It's basically the top. Okay, so there are rules around short notice cancellations, but often when we find, so it's basically in relation to if you book a home visit, you go out there and the participant isn't available or they haven't turned up, or something like that, or they give you short notice cancellation. So often we will put in our service agreements around cancellation notices. But with support coordinator role, because we do a lot of the work behind the scenes, often we don't charge for short notice cancellations because we use that time to complete other activities. So we often use that time, because we often have limited hours, to be quite productive and get other activities completed within the time we would have really had that meeting. Okay, hopefully that's providing some clarity for people. Okay, non-billable activities. So these are the things that are non-billable and are outside the scope of charging for billable time. Okay, so these tasks may still be essential activities that you complete every day as part of your role or as a responsibility if you're working for an organisation, but they are not billable activities that can be charged against participants' plan. Okay, transporting participants. So it is not part of a support coordinator's role to transport participants anywhere. And if you do, it's not, you cannot charge for it. It's not billable time. There's a big difference between traveling to and from home visits or appointments for the participant, as opposed to actually transporting a participant to go somewhere. So that is generally the role of a support worker. Okay, advocacy. So the NDIA often talk about support coordinator's role is not as an advocate. What they actually mean is, as a support coordinator, we're constantly gathering information and providing it to the NDIS as an intermediary between the NDIS and a participant, because the NDIS or planners or LACs don't often see a participant on a regular basis. So as an intermediary, we update them about a participant's situation when it changes, what's working, what's not working, through our reporting and all that kind. So when we talk about advocacy, we're talking about a formal advocate. So a formal advocate, you can research them on the internet. They are a support that we can link in when they're available, that supports a participant to access their rights on an ongoing basis. So it might be when you might feel that someone's been taken advantage of, but could be by family members, it could be in relation to accessing their rights. Linking in a formal advocate can actually walk alongside a person and help them access those rights. So that's the difference around advocacy. We're also thinking about organisational and professional responsibilities. So these are things as part of our professional responsibilities in relation to our role. So getting regular supervision. Staff meetings, attending staff meetings, taking sick leave, taking annual leave, accessing ongoing professional training and development. It could be other requirements that your organisation require from you as part of your role. Administrative tasks. So things like creating service bookings, which we don't have so much of these days, setting up participant files, rostering, invoicing. These are all non-billable activities. So I often have support coordinators who come to me and say, when can I start actually billing a client? So as part of our support coordinator role, we often go through the process of intake. So we have a conversation with someone, we identify about what their support needs are, do they have support coordination funding, what type of funding, how much funding, but also what are the skills and experience that they're looking for on a support coordinator, and really understanding if we're a good match. But what we also need to do is make sure that we formalise that arrangement and get an agreement from a participant or their support network to actually engage us as support coordinators. So that's around getting a service agreement signed, providing consent forms, information about privacy, all that kind of stuff. It's all part of the onboarding process for a participant. All of that time is non-billable. A support coordinator cannot actually start charging for their time until those documents are actually signed. And I have often done that as part of one process, so going out, meeting with a participant, confirming they want to go with our service, getting the service agreement signed, all the documentation signed, and then my billable time starts from when we actually start the planning process. Okay, professional networking. I suppose I get a lot of questions around research. So I do a lot of research around participant support needs. When can I charge for research and when can I not? So there's a difference. If you're researching for specifically in relation to a participant support needs, so researching what speech therapists might be available, or researching plan managers, or whatever that might be, that is billable time. Yeah. But if you are networking and building your awareness of supports, of broader supports and services available within your community, then that is not billable time. That is about building your professional knowledge. Okay? Hopefully that's making a bit more sense. I'm sure I'm getting lots of questions. Okay, let's have a look at billable time best practice. So recording billable time accurately is essential for compliance, accountability, but also transparency for participants around the amount and how we're utilising our support coordination hours. Okay, often what I say to support coordinators is, when you're onboarding a participant, either have it clearly written in your service agreement or provide a handout, around one-page handout that clearly says, this is who we are, this is our point of difference, this is how we work with participants, person-centred, all that kind of information. But also, this is how we utilise support coordination hours. So these are things that we bill against, and these are the activities, and break that down to tasks and what we complete on a daily basis. One pager provides really clear transparency, and it sets up realistic expectations about how a support coordinator completes their role. Okay. The NDIA expects support coordination providers to demonstrate that billable activities are linked to how they have assisted a participant to pursue their goals. That the activities are agreed upon in advance. So by providing that handout, clearly documenting them in your service agreements, clear agreement by participant, and are properly recorded to ensure transparency in how support coordination funding is being utilised. So that's where we go back to. We're keeping your case notes up to date, recording action plans. So your case notes focus on a summary of what was discussed, what happened, why it happened, what are the goals that it relates to, which lead into action plans. So what are the next steps? What are the actions that we're going to take, and who's doing what? What is the other stakeholders going to do? What are you going to do? And what are the time frames? of when that will be completed. So it helps you to keep track of what's actually happening and when it's happening, especially when you've got a caseload of participants that you're working with. And then also risk assessments. When there's an increase in complexity and risk becomes evident, you are required to complete risk assessments. So having an action plan that links to a risk assessment helps you to keep track of risks and managing risks, but also who's taking responsibility for managing that risk. What are the mitigation strategies that you put in place? These are all documentation that you can attach to your reporting. Clearly evidences the level of complexity and intensity of support that's required. Okay. Let's have a look at some best practice strategies to assist you to manage your support coordination hours efficiently and effectively. So we know with support coordination funding, it's broken down in the total amount of hours which are available to bill against. So we get the total amount of funding, we divide that by how many years, I suppose, but also we divide that by the hourly rate, and that gives us an amount of hours. As support coordinators, we don't charge per hour. That's not how it works. It's not how any therapist or anyone actually charges. They have an hourly rate that we can bill against, but we need to be really transparent and accountable about how we charge against that hourly rate. So most support coordinators record their time in either 6 or 15-minute increments, and they round it up or they round it down, which generally evens out over a period of time. So for example, if you were taking a phone call from a participant and then sending an email and then putting in your case notes, it might have taken all up 20 minutes. So this could be recorded in 3 6-minute increments, so 18 minutes, or 1 15-minute block. So, and then the next time it might take 22 minutes, and so you might record that as a 20-minute block. So again, it evens out over time. So to reduce the administrative burden and ensure you're utilising your support coordination hours efficiently, make sure that you're utilising a software solution like support coordination software. So the whole purpose of using, I talk to support coordinators on a daily basis who, when I say to them, what systems are you, they're constantly talking to me about the limited amount of support coordination hours that they have available. They keep running out of support coordination hours. They're not meeting their KPIs, or they're really struggling to get the work done. And I often talk to them about what systems and processes and what software are you using to streamline your support coordination administrative processes, to reduce the amount of time that you're spending doing admin and increasing the time that you actually have to work with participants. And often the reply to me is often multiple manual spreadsheets or multiple different systems that do different things. So one system might do case notes, another system might, I don't know, track support coordination hours in a manual spreadsheet. So it's about understanding and reviewing the systems and the processes and the software that you're using that helps you to utilize your practice. So it's also about understanding what does that software hold for you. So with support coordination software, we've developed not only to streamline your systems and processes, but we've built in practice. So we've built in person-centered tools to help you gather the information you need to evidence how you've supported a participant, unpacking a plan, measuring their confidence in navigating and implementing their plan, action plans, risk assessments. Okay, so that's the biggest way that I talk to support coordinators on a daily basis to ensure you have compliance, accountability, and transparency. Also things like using a software system like support coordination software, where some support coordinators actually print out their case notes and provide them, or they print out an activity statement that clearly details all the billable time and what they've allocated so that a participant can clearly see how their funding's being utilised. Another way is so when writing your case notes, your action plans and your risk assessments, making sure that you clearly connect activities completed and that they align with the participants' plan goals and outcomes achieved. So that really helps you when you come to your reporting. So if it's clearly aligned to the plan goals and the outcomes achieved, and they're clearly documented within your system, all in one place, one system, not many, and it's all automated, what it means is that when you come to your reporting, way more streamlined. You're saving way more time doing your reporting because it's all the information's there. So by applying these principles, some really good strategies around best practice, it helps support coordinators to ensure that the billing is transparent, defensible, and aligned with NDIS expectations. Okay. So to summarise, billable activities are those that directly assist a participant to implement and manage their plan, whether they're face-to-face, non-face-to-face, they are all billable activities. So it's being really clear around the scope and boundaries of your role. Non-billable activities are organisational and administrative tasks that are part of running a service. So they're not claimable from a participant's NDIS plan. They're also things that are outside the scope of your role. A support coordinator's role is 9 to 5 or 8 to 4. It's not after hours. It's not in the weekends. Support coordination hours are within a specific working day. Yeah. So it's not like psychosocial recovery coaching. That funding is basically 24 hours a day. It's allocated so that a participant who has really high and complex support needs in relation to the impact of their psychosocial impairment, they often need support not from 9 to 5. They need support, maybe call someone in the weekend or whatever that might be. So completely different roles, completely different purpose of funding and service delivery. Okay, hopefully that's making sense. Right, we've got a bit of time. So I'm going to go and have a look at Q&A session. So I'm going to open up the Q&A, and I've been hearing it going ping, ping, ping. So I'm sure there's lots and lots of questions. So I'm just going to scroll down to the bottom. So I get the first ones first. Okay, they're still coming in. The other thing is to, if I don't get through all the questions, because I do have a limited time frame, then basically what the Endeavour will do is they will send through questions through to me, and then I will provide more in-depth responses to them, and then they will be uploaded to the Endeavour website with the recording. So you can see the recording if you weren't able to attend the webinar, and you can also see responses to the questions. Okay, let's go. Nadia asks, I noticed that provider travel didn't include kilometres travelled. Where can that be claimed from? Okay. I find that one really, really confusing. I would actually have a look under the NDIS provider travel guidelines, because they're very clear around when you can and can't claim for travel. So, and it's also around what you're actually claiming for and how much you can claim for. So Nadia, I know it's not really answering your question, but it's a very complex answer. And all I can say to you is go to the NDIS price guide. So if you don't understand the rules around travel and kilometre claiming for travel, some of it's only when you're using core supports. Often it's around capacity building supports. Go and get some advice from someone who's actually already using travel around this. Okay. Did I hear case notes are billable hours? Case notes are absolutely billable hours. I get this question every single day. Your case notes, your action plans, the reports that you write, your risk assessments are all billable time. They are your professional responsibility to evidence and be compliant and transparent around how you have provided support to a participant. It's the information that you provide to the NDIS around the level of complexity or the intensity that you're working for, the evidence that you need to provide of when you need additional support coordination hours. Absolutely billable time. Okay. Electra, do you always have to share a support coordinator report to a plan nominee? Okay. I would say yes. I would say if you're working with a participant, when you start working with a participant and their support network, it's about setting up expectations of how you're going to work together right at the beginning. So when you're doing your service agreement and you start your planning, you start saying, right, how are we going to communicate? What is the information that you need from me? How often do we need to be in contact? Do we need regular home visits? So I've worked with people who don't want me going into their homes. We meet outside their home. I've also had people who want me to constantly email them with updates on a weekly basis or a fortnightly basis, or they might like texts. I've always provided copies of reports unless people have generally said to me, I'm not really interested in seeing what's in the reports. I suppose it's about being transparent about what we're saying and how we're saying it, and being really, really clear around what is the purpose of the report. Okay. Michelle asks, can we invoice attending webinars? If you're talking about your professional training, professional development, gaining more education, increasing your skills, absolutely not. If you're attending a webinar that's around, say you're working somewhere that's quite remote and you are looking for service providers who might be able to come to your area, and there might be a group of service providers who have got together and are targeting a specific area, and they can all go, these are the services that we provide, and you're asking them questions around your specific participants to determine whether they can provide supports for your participants. That would be different. So again, thinking about what is direct research that's in relation to a specific needs of a participant you're supporting, and what is research that's about building your knowledge of what's available within community. But in relation to attending webinars, if it's around your professional skill development, it's not claimable. Okay. Frida, is it important to have copies of all service agreements for participants? Most service providers don't send them to me. I would say as a support coordinator, absolutely, it's important that you have copies of participant service agreements. It's our role to safeguard, to that safeguarding practice, to ensure that service agreements are meeting participant support needs, that there's nothing within that service agreement that's actually outside of what a service provider can be billing for. We need to be making sure that the conditions within the service agreement, that a participant is able to understand them, that they clearly relate to a participant's goals and the outcomes to be achieved by providing that service, that they're billing, that they're actually going to be claiming against the right amount, that they're actually not going to be overbilling someone or underbilling someone. Having copies of service agreements, so it's about safeguarding upfront, making sure service agreements are correct and applicable and accountable for participants, but also when you have copies of service agreements, you can see when they're running out, but also for situations like if someone's in supported independent living, does the service agreement actually talk about when a participant's unwell or a participant goes on holiday, how the claiming is actually going to happen? What kind of reporting is that cell provider going to provide to the participant and their family? So, and it's also about things like if you're working with a participant and you find, say, for example, they're overutilising their funding in relation to having support workers in the home, going back to a service agreement and going, well, what was actually agreed to? So that's why it's really, really important. Okay. Emily asks, so so just to answer your question, Frida, if a service provider says to me, I don't need to provide you a copy of the service agreement, you need to be talking to them about your safeguarding role, what your role is in relation to supporting a participant to understand what's going on. So it's really about explaining your support coordinator role and why always getting copies of service agreements. Emily asks, what about transporting participants with psychosocial recovery coaching? Psychosocial recovery coaching is a completely different role to support coordination. So at the moment, I'm talking about support coordinator level 2 COS, yeah? So transport is not a billable activity under support coordinator level 2 COS. Okay. Emma asks, supervision question, if you are discussing a specific client, does it then become billable? And if so, can both the supervisor and supervisee charge or just one person? Supervision is not billable time. Supervision is about your increasing your professional understanding, your skills, your ability, your experience. It is absolutely not billable time. As a professional, as a support coordinator, we constantly need to be building our skills, our experience, our understanding, our ability, learning new strategies. That's what supervision is all about. It's absolutely not billable time. Electra. I'm just keeping an eye on the time. What if a client has a 3-hour client supervision meeting with a child protection? Do I need to charge, or do I decide to charge for half an hour? I don't really understand that question. Electra, it would be helpful if you actually email me, maybe with more information, info@SC Academy. So if the client has children who are under the Child Protection Act or Justice, and they are meeting with Child Protection or Justice, I wouldn't really see a need of why a support coordinator would need to be present in that meeting. The only time a support worker might need to support that person to actually attend those meetings, but it's not a support coordinator's role. That would be a support worker's role. The only time that I would see that there would be a meeting with Child Protection or Justice or mainstream services is when you're having stakeholder meetings. So you might be having a meeting with the Child Protection officer who might be working with a family to really understand and clarify what their responsibilities are, what supports they're providing, what your responsibility is, the supports that you're providing, and how you can utilise that NDIS funding to complement the supports being provided. Understanding the boundaries of the roles, understanding what supports are needed. Hopefully that clarifies the question. Okay. Can contacting the NDIS help desk to check a related issue for participant be classified as billable? Unfortunately, yes. It's probably the biggest time waster that we have as support coordinators, because often it can take a lot of time. So if you are a support coordinator and you have consent, so you've filled in the NDIS consent form and you've sent it in, and you have consent to talk to the NDIS about a participant's plan. So you might be inquiring about the progress of a change of situation or an application for SIL, whatever that might be. You're talking to the NDIS to get information. You might be talking about a review coming up or whatever that might be. That is all billable time. I think that's answering your question. Check a related issue for a participant. Okay, hopefully that's answering your question. I suppose another question that I often get around billable time is a support coordinator has once said to me, they contacted me and said, I've got this provider who has issue with their billing, with their plan manager. They're constantly contacting me to sort out the issue with the plan manager. And what I say to them is that it's not your responsibility. The responsibility is with the provider and the plan manager. It is their responsibility to manage that issue and that's about understanding, again, the boundaries of your role. Okay. Can support coordinators bill for supporting with arranging NDIA endorsements? Again, I'm not really clear what that means. If you're talking about supporting a person with a disability to gain access to the scheme, absolutely not. If you're talking about, that's not billable time because that's not what support coordinators do. That's an LAC can support someone through that. Early childhood team. There's a number of advocates and organisations that help with that. If you're talking about a person's needs change and you are supporting a participant so they get an additional diagnosis with the related impairment, say, for example, someone has an intellectual disability and they develop some psychosocial or mental health challenges that are over a period of time become permanent, significant reduced capacity, and you're supporting that participant to get the NDIS to acknowledge on the NDIS profile that they have additional diagnosis and related psychosocial impairment, say, for example, so that they can get the additional supports that they need, that would be billable time. All relates to a participant. Hopefully that clarifies your question. I know that was very long-winded. Haley asks, can you charge the intake onboarding process under an statutory? Absolutely not. Support coordinators don't charge establishment fees. We can't charge them at all. It's not part of our role. So your intake processes, your onboarding processes up until a service agreement and consent forms have been signed. Only after that time can a participant actually bill for billable activities, because you haven't even engaged the participant yet. You haven't even got approval or agreement that they're going to engage with service, confirmation that they understand how your service is going to be provided or that consent's been provided. So only after that time can you actually start start billing. Beth asks, service bookings aren't billable, but we now spend ages trying to work out these new quarterly budgets and making sure funds are reserved with PMAs. Okay. So that everyone gets paid correctly with the limited funding available in the quarter. It's an essential part of making sure it works. Is that billable? Yes, unfortunately it is. So all the activities that you complete in relation to understanding how participants' budget works, when the funding periods come in, understanding what funds they have available within certain periods, forecasting when those funds might be available and working with the participant to make sure that the supports that they get align within those periods is all part of your billable time. Again, this is why service agreements and having copies of service agreements and schedules that attach to a service agreements are really good. That's really about providing the, so you might be negotiating, say, for some supports, really talking to that provider around the funding that's available, when the funds might be available, and getting them to really detail within the schedule of supports how many supports they're going to provide and when they're going to provide and what that's going to look like. Okay. What is the feeling on 15-minute increments? It would be good for people to comment on that with Deborah. What is the feeling on 15-minute increments? Me personally, I use 15-minute increments. I find it's a much better way because I'm often doing a number of things at the same time. I'm not often just doing one thing for one participant. And I might not even be doing, I often keep track of the time that I'm doing throughout the day, then I do my case notes. So I generally roll it up and roll it down. I find that works better for me than 6-minute increments. Okay, here we go. Here's the time. Got about 2 minutes. Amber asks, what would the process be for advocacy engagement when there are no advocacy services available? Yeah, quite correct. Particularly with ART, so the review tribunal, when advocacy groups do not have capacity and can only offer 1-hour conversation to support the participant nominee, which is often sometime in the future. This then leaves vulnerable people more vulnerable as we are unable to provide billable supports within the ART process. It is absolutely a gap, Amber. And I think it's really about thinking outside the box. And preparing a participant to go to a tribunal as much as possible. So utilizing your time as efficiently as possible. So what is the evidence, and putting that in plain language that they can take with them as much as possible. Linking in any other informal supports and networks that might be able to go with them to the tribunal that will help them understand what's going on. Ensuring that the tribunal understands the impact of their disability and the supports that they will need. So there's a number of ways that we can actually mitigate some of that impact. But again, I acknowledge that often there are not advocacy services that can support them through that process. Okay, Claire asks, what are your views regarding charging clients for clinical supervision for strategizing outside? Clinical supervision is not billable time. Again, clinical supervision is around building your skills, your professional knowledge, your professional ability. It's part of your role as a professional. Okay, I'm going to have to stop answering questions, and there's way more questions to answer. So again, Endeavour will send those questions to me and I will write responses to them, and they will be available up on the NDIS website. So you'll receive an email from Endeavour about where you can find all that. Thank you very much, and I'm going to hand back over to Vicky.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mary. Once again, fantastic information there. It's really, really interesting to see how much the questions come through and how you're able to answer those in so much detail in such a short space of time. So really want to say thank you for that today. As Mary said, we will go through all the questions that are unanswered. We'll pop them over to Mary. She'll have a look through and try and consolidate if any are the same. And then we will put those on our website. So just give us a few days, because obviously we have to do a lot of work behind this as well now. So just to make sure that we get that ready for you. And we normally say in a week's time, we'll have that uploaded, and then an email will come out from me to you guys to say exactly with the webinar recording, the PowerPoint slides that I saw a lot of people asking about, and also the Q&As. So yeah, look out for that next week in your inboxes. Just to bring you over to our final webinar for 2025 next month in November, we're going to be having our next topic is going to be Holiday Ready, supporting participants and families through the festive season. And that is on Tuesday, the 18th of November at the same time of 12 till 1 AEST. So yeah. So before we go, I just also want to let you know that we've shared the link to all our previous recordings on YouTube, so you can catch up on all our previous sessions. And we've also just dropped the link to our Care Connect monthly newsletter in the chat. That's also full of really handy resources and information for support coordinators. So on behalf of Endeavour Foundation, I just want to say thank you so much to Mary, Shania, and everybody else behind the scenes to help us bring these webinars to you guys. And thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. I wish you a fantastic afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you next month for our final one of 2025. Thank you.